what we thought we'd do now is, before we get into the nitty-gritty of doing or creating our set piece for the day, the things we'll be doing tonight, and remember, when we talk about set piece, we're talking about a launch pad from which everything else comes, right? So you don't have to be stuck on it. In fact, on Sunday, when we do all the bonus stuff, Anthony here and some of the assistants will be showing you different ways of creating your own unique routines. But at least you'll have one thing that you have tried, you'll have tested, you'll have put through fire, you know, it's bulletproof, it'll work for you anytime you want. So it's there for you. Does that make sense? So before we go into the actual physical mechanics of all this, one thing which is very important to start talking about at this stage, because you're now getting into some pretty serious hypnotic territory, right, is the whole health and safety aspect of it. Hypnosis is safe, and when you use hypnosis, you can keep people very safe, but then there's also things you can do with it that can harm people. You've all seen, shall we say, the stereotypical bad parent that tells their kids off, and so much so that they end up having a really terrible life, you know? So, what kind of things do you think might possibly go wrong, like in the whole, just look at the hypnosis, street hypnosis in the big picture, even the extreme situations, what kind of things could go wrong if you did hypnosis long enough? Just let's list some things out so we can start thinking about how to deal with it and how to avoid them happening. Any ideas? So an ab reaction, right? That's the classic one, and we'll talk about what ab reactions are and how to handle them in good course. Go ahead. Friends becoming distractions. So that in itself could be just a barrier to hypnosis. How could that be a problem in terms of health and safety? So I'm really now concerned only in terms of the health and safety of the people that you're working with and yourself as a hypnotist, so that you don't do damage, you don't get damaged. Make sense? Well, go on.
They fall down.
1 second. Go ahead.
They actually fall.
Now we've got something there. So falling. Okay. Cassie? Okay, said it. Go ahead. Okay, so we got hysteria. So we'll call it hysteria in general, shall we? Laughter is just one form of it, right? Was there anything over here? Go ahead. Wild subject. So what's the problem with having a wild subject? Violent. Oh, sorry. There you go. Violent. All right. What could cause a subject to get violent? Any ideas? So if you do something fear-based, they may risk. Some people attack into fear. Some people retreat from fear, right? So they may get violent by defending themselves. It may be just like if you create a context in which they have to defend themselves, they might be violent. It might be anger, right? You might put them in a situation where anger can be there. Those of you who've seen the stage hypnosis DVDs, you know, one of the skits that Spence likes to do is the one where someone's getting really angry with him every time he says the word hypnosis, they call him a fake and so on, right? Now, from sheer experience, he had to put in the following suggestion along the lines of, you cannot stand up on the stage, you cannot touch the stage, you cannot throw anything on the stage, you cannot spit. All you can do is express yourself verbally. Now, he's basically cut out every other possible physical behavior because at some point or other, it's probably happened to him. Make sense? So if you're going to go down more extreme kind of suggestions, you've got to make sure you take care of both the person you're working with and yourself or anyone else around them. Make sense? What other things might go wrong? Okay, exactly. Let's call that, and excuse the pun, emergency, emerge. I know, it's late in the day. Go ahead. Okay, let's call drugs separately. Epilepsy, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about epilepsy in a moment. It's not quite what people make out, but we will talk about specifically. Absolutely right. Anything else? Actually, you know, I'll just add something to the epilepsy thing, which is really what most people think about, but it hasn't to do with epilepsy, is accidentally triggering some kind of a fit, whether it's an asthma attack or something like that. Okay?
Psychotic episode.
Okay. Anything else? The runaway whilst in trance, exactly. Then you can't immerse them safely and so on, right? Anything else? Anything else you want to add? I think it's a pretty good list for me. I know. Oh my God, this is so terrible. Why did I come to this seminar? Now, of course, you do realize that we are having this list up here not to terrify the pants out of you. It's just to be aware of possibilities and, more importantly, on how to prevent these things from happening. Does that make sense? It would be remiss of us not to talk about these things, because then you're just kind of dumping in the soup and you have to work out as you go along, which incidentally is kind of what you and I have done. It's just kind of old school versus new school hypnosis. Hopefully your life will be a lot easier than ours. Okay? Most of these things need never occur if you do your work right. Here's what I mean for example. Let's look at the classic ones actually over here, the ones which are the most common things. The most common things you might come across that, you know, if you would percentage on this would take 99.9% of the whole pie, are people falling down, people running away, and doing some kind of crazy activities. In other words, these are all failures to suggest, right? This is when your own suggestions have become misinterpreted or overinterpreted so that it's gone way beyond the scope that you intended, right? When you say to someone, for example, you know, in a moment, I'm going to say the word pink, every time the word pink, you're going to get really angry with me, right? As far as you're concerned, it's just an emotional suggestion you're giving, right? Of course, if the person takes it as an emotional suggestion that actually runs with a physical behavior, because there's a pattern built in it, right? You've triggered a physical behavior, even though you weren't aiming for it. Does that kind of make sense? So what is the most obvious way of assuring that these things don't happen? Suggest them away, exactly. So there's two sides of that coin, right? The first side of the coin is think a little bit ahead of time. How do you phrase your suggestions so that they're about as clear as they can get, right? There is no 100%, right? You've phrased things as clearly as you can get, and people have made some bizarre association to it, right? It's going to happen. So that's what you know, the version 2 will be about. But really, most of these problems can be taken care of if you are clear and lucid and thoughtful about what suggestions you present. Does that make sense to you guys? Philip. Great. So Philip's saying, wouldn't it be a great idea to have a suggestion up front, which is kind of a cover-all, so that they basically ignore negatively phrased suggestions or suggestions that might be negative to them? Absolutely, I would encourage you to do that, and nothing is foolproof.
Okay, let me start that again. I'll just run through these core ones, because some of these are things you can easily control with suggestions. Some of these are things you can avoid by avoiding certain routines. And some of them are just a numerical, statistical oddity that you will experience if you hypnotize thousands of people. And I've experienced this emergency, some people call it a hypnocoma. It said sleep, and that was the last thing I heard in 40 minutes. She didn't respond to me or anybody else. That was quite a scary situation to be in. But in 5,000 sessions of hypnosis, in performance mode, I've never had someone have an abreaction, ever. The vast majority of hypnotists I speak to have not experienced it.
Right.
Okay? So the statistics are small. With regard to the coma, Gil Boyne gave a quote on that. He was hypnotizing for 53 years. He saw 12 cases of it. My father's hypnotized 30,000 people. We've seen it twice. Right. It's not, you know, this is not going to happen every time you go out or anything like that. However...
Can I just make a point on the hypnocoma? We're getting a little bit ahead of it. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more maybe tomorrow. But before you think like, oh my God, there's some cases that people don't emerge, here's the thing to remember. It may have taken 40 minutes, but they came back on their own.
Yes. So
the worst thing that can happen is that it just takes them a while to come back. Now, the key thing here is, and this is what we'll talk more about tomorrow, is if you're in a hypnotherapy session, you can afford to let them sit in the chair and just zone out for a couple of hours, right? They will come back eventually. It's just a question of time. Whatever happens to be inside has to process through or whatever. If it happens to you on the street, and remember, this is a very, very, very rare phenomenon, even rarer than everything else is on that list, then the main job, and this is what we'll talk about tomorrow, will just mainly to be crowd control, right? It's everyone else that will be concerned. The person in that trance state is just like, wow, this is pretty cool. So it's just a question, it's just a function of time and your ability to manage the crowd long enough to let nature take its course. Does that make sense? And for all other kinds of emergency stuff like this, in a moment, once we finish with some of the other things, we'll talk about how to escalate people through a awakening process if they happen to be a little bit recalcitrant.
Eagle's got a great technique for dealing with abreactions, which again, I say I haven't experienced one in performance. I've created thousands of abreactions in the therapy room because that's part of the way I do my therapy. I'm thinking yes when I have an abreaction. I love it. I know I've got hold of that thorn. I'm about to pull it out, and I know it'll go away, and they won't be in pain in 30 seconds' time. So, just to put this into context, again, you can see some of these are based on suggestions. The problems are going to come from negligence. The problems are going to come from you doing this too close to a curb. You doing this to someone whose boyfriend really doesn't like their girlfriend being touched. You doing this to someone who just happens to have a model that hypnosis means relaxation and your body goes all floppy and you fall over, and you not standing next to them and being in control of that small possibility, or not saying sleep and stand. So, again, there have been people who have been damaged in the middle of a hypnosis act. But in the UK, out of, I think, 27 cases, 25 involved people falling off a stage, twisting their ankle, banging their head on a light. A rubbish chair that didn't support them. It wasn't they became psychotic because of a rogue suggestion about bananas, This is a situation for you to manage, but you do have to manage it. You are responsible for it.
Right.
Okay? So, first off, the easiest thing you can do is get your framing of this early on. How this is going to be, how it's going to happen, where they're going to sit, and you dictate that area. If you're here and there happen to be 10 wine glasses on the table, and you don't really want them facing the table, it could be so much safer if they just face away from the table. If you're going to have them moving, have them open their eyes. If you're going to make them angry, tell them they won't be violent. If you're going to tell them it will taste disgusting, tell them they won't be sick. You can rein this in just with another couple of words, and most of that stuff will be taken care of.
Right.
With regard to abreaction and the more emotional outpourings, avoid. Okay, we're coming on to that, but it's just a case of avoiding regression and things that can obviously turn up, some old memories.
Let's just look at these things, the general ones in the red circles for a moment. People running away, falling down, getting violent, having bad reactions to a suggestion itself. Do you all feel comfortable that with a little bit of thought, you can basically avoid presenting suggestions that can be misunderstood in that way? Would that be fair to say? Yes?
Running away. You will not leave this area. Should you need to leave the building, everything will be back to normal.
Right.
Done.
Then the next step is, if something does go wrong for whatever reason, let's say you put all the safety belts in place, but they still misunderstood you, maybe they misheard you, right? What would you do at that point? Repeat this, or give a new suggestion to counteract whatever's going on. So if the person hasn't heard the thing about not being violent, you can go say, sleep and freeze. Or actually, freeze might be like getting cold, right? Sleep and stand, right? Or you can't move, that's right, the behavior all gone, fear, all the emotion all gone. You just can rest and comfortably drift to your thing. Make sense? So you look out for the physical space. You don't start doing instant inductions right at the edge of something like this, right? That's kind of asking for trouble. You present your suggestions very clearly with a mind to what might happen in the extreme cases of people who experience this sort of thing. And if something negative does start to happen, and this starts taking this idea of fits and stuff as well, you counteract it. Let me give an example of what I mean by this. This is not from my own personal history. This is from a medical doctor that unfortunately hadn't had the best hypnosis training. In one of his relaxation scripts with a patient, an asthma patient, for some reason, he decided to bring him into a nice field full of flowers and hay and stuff like that. Because to the doctor, it was a very relaxing image. What he didn't quite put together, as if you've chuckled have already done, is that the asthma was set off by things like pollen and especially grass pollen and all kinds of stuff like that. So he just basically dumped him in the environment which stimulates the fit. In this case, an asthma attack, right? So can you imagine that being a less than positive event for the individual, right? Now, luckily, the doctor was, shall we say, intelligent enough that when he saw the fit beginning, the asthma attack coming on, that he pulled him out of the situation and had counteractive suggestions to calm him down. Your breathing's opening up into the clouds, it's clear, the air is clear, cool breeze, you're breathing deeply, breathing calmly, it's all gone now, you can be fantastic and so on. So he's basically created a new context which will cancel out whatever it is was creating the problem. Does that make sense? So it's really an extension of these things here. And this is really where the idea of epilepsy comes in. We normally cover this more when we talk about hypnotherapy, but I'll cover it briefly now. There is an old belief in hypnosis that you should not work with epileptics because you might trigger a fit. That is incorrect. The only way you will trigger a fit with an epileptic is if you hit upon one of the triggers that triggers a fit. For example, if they are photosensitive, in other words, there are certain rhythms of light, which is one of the most common forms of triggers for epilepsy, and you now put them, say, in a nightclub and there's a disco ball spinning around and those shining lights, right? You can see how the environment might stimulate the brain in the same way as a physical environment might. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? But it's not just photosensitivity, there might be other things. Most epileptics will have a sense of what kind of environments, what kind of triggers set them off. So if you ever do work with an epileptic, it's a good idea to get a medical referral anyway, just to cover your own base. But really, just get a long list of the things that trigger them off and avoid them. It's as simple as that. If you happen to work with someone on the street who's epileptic and they don't tell you ahead of time because this is a performance thing, then again, as soon as any onset sign of something happens, any sign of something not being quite right, just shut down whatever it was and create a completely different environment in which those suggestions, the old suggestions, have been cancelled out. And very often, well, not very often, really you're suggesting away the problem. It will fade away, it will disappear. Does that make sense to you guys?
And you know, in the UK, there is a law about hypnosis, and we're not going to get into the details of that. But what came out of the law were some just best ideas of best practice. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when I'm on stage, I've got the luxury of and time to say all this stuff. But you really should be saying this stuff if you're working with a group on the street. Just make it easier for yourself. Don't work with people who are under 18.
Yep.
Do not work with people who are under 18. Okay?
In most countries, it may be an offence, a criminal offence. It's a whole consent issue.
Do not work with people under 18. Do not work with people who are asthmatic, epileptic, got heart problems, severe back problems, or are pregnant. Okay? Just spit it out. You're not really looking to be working with people who are on serious drugs because they're psychotic. Right? So be prepared to say it. And again, it doesn't have to be a 10-minute lecture that kills the mood of the hypnosis. Okay, you can say, you know, you're out here, there's loads of people out here, you can say, okay, first off, you're all 18, you know, I just want to make sure that, you know, we're going to do some stuff that you can all take part in, but you cannot come up here and take part in the main bit of hypnosis if you're this, or this, and just reel it off, and then you've said it, and more than that, it shows that you care, it shows that you know your business, and, you know, the point about these things is that it will rapidly bring the fun to an end. If that person has a fit or gets upset or even sheds a tear sometimes. And no, I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to do any damage by suggesting something silly to someone if you control the environment, you don't let them run, you don't allow it to become confusion. Okay, but even that these are things that you should control, and you can control most of it in your setup and your intro. Once you've said it, it's done. You know, it's up to them if they want to take part.
So in a moment, you're going to actually have an opportunity to actually practice this. In other words, part of your introduction, somewhere along the lines of when you start doing the finger magnets and so on, I mean, that's relatively benign. There's not much you can do. There's not much that can go wrong there because it's very open-ended. But somewhere in that spiel, maybe between suggestibility tests or before you do the induction or somewhere inside the induction, you want to get all those things rattled out. Right? You may even do it before you even start the suggesting things.
I'd suggest you do it before the induction. They might, you know, it might be too late.
Exactly. So just experiment with different places where you feel comfortable saying these things. And as Anthony was saying, they can be quick one-liners. You can even make a little joke out of it. I can't work with you if you're on drugs, whether the doctor gave them to you or someone else. Yeah. It just kind of clears up all your bases, and it avoids basically pretty much everything on this list here. Does that make sense to you guys?
I tell you. Yeah.
If someone's pregnant, hopefully your visual acuity will kind of be able to
but
tell.
not always. But again, you've had it today. The most obvious time for me to do this is once you've done your approach and you've introduced yourself and you're essentially getting ready to go. Can I show you something interesting? Right? You will often get the questions that you want to just mow down straight away. The fears, can I get trapped in it? Can I get stuck in it? They're looking for some reassurance from an expert. So be the expert at that point and tell them it's not this and it's not that, but you can only take part if you're this, or this. Is that cool? Good. And then it's done. You've given a health and safety speaks. The other bits and pieces, the kind of reaffirmations that you're safe and you're well, that you're protected, your unconscious is looking after you, are just to make the person feel secure. And as you said, to kind of state early on that, look, I can't give you a suggestion that will bring any harm to you, because you've already kind of suggested that you can't. But it's worth saying, but often not, just keep an eye on the situation. And if for some reason one of your instructions is misinterpreted or seems to upset the person, that can happen with amnesia. You give someone name amnesia or total amnesia. I've had people burst into tears at that point because they're bloody confused. Okay. But if you don't want them confused, then tell them they'll find it funny, and then they'll just laugh at the fact they can't remember their name. You should be dictating their response. And again, this is all material we're going to get into in much more detail tomorrow.
So when we come on to practicing this whole thing, do you want to have a really simple way of remembering kind of how to do the hypnotic warning before you go into your show, right? In my mind, the key idea I want to present is the idea of vulnerability, right? So I'm just saying, look, if anyone is in a particularly vulnerable group, I don't want to work with you. If you're pregnant, underage, on drugs, or have some kind of clinical condition going on, then please let me know. It's not that I can't work with you. It's just, well, it's not necessarily the setting to do this sort of work in, right? So it's really casual. It shows that you're taking care of someone. The word or the vulnerable already triggers people's minds like, I have diabetes. Does that make me vulnerable, right? And then you said, well, how serious is it? Are you on heavy medication? In which case, just sit this one out. Or is it just to have a little shot in the arm every now and again and you're fine, right? So it just allows them to come back and ask you, well, am I okay for this? Does that make sense? So everyone clear on how to take care of these things ahead of time before they even arise? So now the last question, thank you for reminding me on here, is the idea of hysteria. What if you trigger a laughing fit or something like that they can't kind of get out of and so on? As a rule, hysteria is a form of hypnotic phenomena, right? In other words, an unconscious response is taking over and they can't consciously control it. That's essentially what you're saying. What you don't want happening is that the hysteria runs out of control in the sense that you're no longer part of that trance. If you're the hypnotist, you can suggest the phenomena away. So the key thing is, as soon as the subject starts responding with something that you have not suggested, you need to start slowing things down and redirecting it, right? So in other words, you will never have a full-blown hysteria because you'll never have suggested that kind of laughter. If they have, you have this uncontrollable, burst of laughter and they're going on and on and on, it's all fantastic and good fun, right? Then start steering it away. If they refuse to leave that point, now you have to start focusing on the suggestions of, that's it, you can laugh, it's funny, but it's kind of fading away, and you're just emphasizing more and more that whatever the effect is, in this case it's hysteria, but it could be any of the other things as well, that those things are, the effects being dampened down is becoming less and less and so on. Essentially, it's the reverse of what we're going to come on to in a moment. If you want the hand to lift and you have a little twitch, you're encouraging the twitch to become more until you have the full levitation. This is the reverse. It's kind of like saying, you have the full levitation, now let's de-encourage it until it's just a normal arm sitting on the lap. Does that kind of make sense to you? So you're just reversing the process of creating a hypnotic phenomenon in order to undo one, if you need it. Usually though, just so you know, unless you've already lost that person, which means you haven't been paying attention for quite a bit of time, then a simple suggestion that it clears up will clear it up. Right? That's really been my experience. I don't know if it's been your experience.
That's been my experience the vast majority of the time. If you can suggest it, you can suggest it away. Mm-hmm. I've suggested someone's cut themselves shaving before and sticking plasters all over their face. I didn't know they had low blood pressure, so they started to feel faint. It only took 2 seconds to suggest that away, though, and say, you can peel them off, you feel fine. you know, these.
But just notice what Anthony was just saying there, which is he didn't carry on with the gag longer and longer and longer until like sitting there thinking, oh, great, he's fainting. Let's make more of a fainting suggestion, right? He didn't encourage the problem. The minute something uncomfortable, anything negative, anything slightly out of control starts happening, you are responsible. You're running the show, so shut that part of the show down. That's not a side display that needs to be opened, right?
And just to come back to this, people who don't emerge, I just want to add my thoughts on it because I have experienced this and relatively recently. It's happened twice, in fact. Once someone in the audience at one of my stage hypnosis shows spontaneously went into it while I was doing my wake up on stage. I'd never seen her. She'd never been on stage. She hadn't paid any attention to the show at all because she was hypnotized throughout the entire show. And I say it's happened on one other occasion. And I, in my reading, have read of many sort of old school techniques should that occur. And they include things like, assume they're faking and they want the attention, right? A lot of stage hypnotists will say that. Anyone who does that is just faking. Other times they'll say, look, they need it. They're loving that so much, they need that hypnosis. Therefore, if you really want them out, tell them they won't be able to feel that good again. I don't really want to nip away at people's possibilities of experiencing life, but, you know, by threatening them essentially that they will not be able to return to that state, apparently that can have some effect. You can just get more commanding, reassert yourself, put your hand on their shoulder, really go for it that way. But if any of that's failing, then there's things like blow on their eyelids, like, you know, massively bang, just shock. Put your fingers into the palms of their hands, give them a little dig in there, that kind of thing. And I've had all this stuff essentially in my back pocket should this occur. And on the couple of occasions it has occurred, I've run through all of those techniques I've just given you. And they didn't make any difference at all in that situation.
As a rule, we do not encourage you to pain or mutilations of the body, something like that. Not encouraged.
I really wouldn't encourage you to do any of that stuff. That person is, in the two experiences of it I've had, and I've spoken to other people who've had similar experiences, in the two experiences I've had, that person has been fine, in a perfectly happy place and state. They're not confused, they're not upset. Problem is, they can't move. They feel like they cannot move. Everything else is normal. So they can hear their friends. They can hear you. They can hear your tone of voice. And if just because they look like a floppy rag doll, you're talking to your friends saying, shit, what are we going to do? This looks bad. You've got to understand, that's just going to reinforce the predicament.
That's a bad suggestion at this point.
So you have to from the off, accept the fact that no one in the history of this game has got stuck in that state forever, or even for days.
It's just a question of time.
Okay, it's a question of time. So your job really is, first off, to reassure them, just like they're wide awake sitting next to you. This is going to be fine, everything's going to be fine. Sometimes people want to spend a little bit of time there, but they always make a decision to wake up at a certain point in time. Okay, just reassure them. Reassure their friends next, immediately. Reassure everybody around and say, this is the situation. Very, very rare, but occasionally people do this. They just want to sleep. She'll wake up in her own time. Reassure them. Get people on your side. This I think what Igor was starting to touch on. Get people on your side. Find someone who looks half sensible in their group and say, look, this is the situation. I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. Your friend is perfectly fine. I know it doesn't look that way, but blah, 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 blah. And get someone on your side. They're going to be much more effective in fending off the other friend who's going, you've broken my friend. And trust me, they will be emotional about it after 10 minutes and 20 minutes. So,
it's only because they don't know what to expect of this whole thing, right? And just to emphasize something that Anthony's saying here, and just so you understand, we're talking about something very rare. There's something very different between the coma, which is what Anthony, or the hypnotic coma,
it's a turn
which
of
is
phrase.
what we're talking about.
It's not a coma.
And someone who's just a little bit hesitant about coming back because they're kind of enjoying themselves, right? You can kind of see that there'll be a big difference. There'll be a different responsiveness and so on. Most people, I mean, that's 99.9 with lots of extra nines at the end, % of people will be absolutely fine if you come through the emergency, the emergence type, waking up type script. they'll come back, and if they don't come back, it's almost like oh, do I have to, right? And then just being more insistent, more, giving more suggestions, more alertness. Sometimes they come back a little bit groggy, so that you just reinforce alertness. You might have a logical chat with them a little bit, maybe give them a little water or something to drink to kind of ground them a bit. These are all really what I expect will be the extreme cases that you'll meet at best. The coma, you really have to go through literally thousands of people to find the one case. So when you do, put a gold star on your shoulder and say, wow, I got my coma. 1 in a million, right? And it literally is 1 in a million.
But it's just a situation where you really can't panic. I'll just put one other thing on the list. And this is, again, it's pretty rare that people take it upon themselves to do this. But on occasion, one of those friends will assert themselves as a hypnotist. So you've had your fun and you've done your performance, and their friend comes up and says, look at me, sleep. Knocks their friend straight out. Again, it's very rare that someone assumes that they would be able to do that. But if they assert themselves with confidence, as some of you did after a couple of hours this morning, you realise that you can hypnotise some people, and it's just very straightforward. So, again, from a personal point of view, I'm not someone who locks subjects down as a matter of course and says, nobody else can hypnotise you, only I can hypnotise you. I think it's a terrible suggestion to, again, limit someone's choices in that way. A seal, exactly. Okay. However, if you're in a situation and suddenly that person you hypnotise is now getting knocked out by their friends, then do it. Put a temporary seal on them for the rest of the evening. No one other than a professional hypnotist who you've given your permission to can hypnotise you. It's very simple stuff, just common sense suggestions again, because that it can cause a problem. And again, I've encountered that in a couple of situations.
If you run into where someone has admitted to being hypnotizable, having been hypnotized, but you can't hypnotize them.
So just so everyone can hear, the question is, has Anthony ever run into a situation where a subject can be hypnotized and they know they've been in trance before, but some hypnotists have sealed them off, so they basically said, no one else but me can hypnotize you, hence you can't do it?
No, I've only run into kind of an indirect seal where an inept hypnotist has told someone that they can't be hypnotized, and they come in with that belief on board, but obviously you can break through that one. However, my father does this as well. He's treated 30,000 people in hypnotherapy, and there was a guy that lived in southeast London, not too far away from my dad, who spent 30 years sealing every single one of his clients and then died. Some of these people wanted hypnotherapy again later in life, and some of those people have come to see my dad. Locks can be broken. So a seal is just a suggestion.
But that's all going beyond the scope of what we've got.
Yeah, it is, but it can be undone. So no, I haven't personally come across it, but my father has, but he managed to talk his way around it because he's a good hypnotist. So
the key thing about seals really to bear in mind is don't put them on people unless it's a very temporary thing, and you maybe just shield them from people. I like the consent seal. In other words, unless you specifically consent to being hypnotized, no one else will hypnotize you for tonight or forever, how long you wish it. It just gives a lot more permission. In terms of breaking seals, this is not really the content of this course. So if you want to do that, come to either one of our advanced courses, and you get to have that there. Woo. All right. So what I want to do is basically, seeing as it's an important segment, before we get into the practical side of things again, there were some comments and questions. I saw a couple of you people kind of putting hands up and so on. So let me just hand this over to you guys. And if you have any comments or questions about this or anything related to this, now's the time to ask, and then we'll move on to something else. Okay. So can you move this back to Cassandra in the back there with the red t-shirt? Thank you, Bob. Just over there in the back.
All right, thank you. I was just going to say...
Is that on? Sorry? Okay.
I haven't obviously yet met a coma person per se, like what you're talking about, like really extreme. But I have met people who have been out for up to 10 minutes, like a more extreme time than, say, the average person would come out.
Sure.
And usually the best way that I've found to get people out is just to suggest that they'll feel just as good as they're starting to feel again in their body. because often they're staying in that state because, as you said, they feel really good, or their body literally is so relaxed they don't know how to move. They can still hear and everything. So if you can just say you can get that movement back, but at the same time still keep that feeling of goodness and relaxation, often people respond to that and will go, hey, yeah, I actually can move my arm and still feel good.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I can move the rest.
It's a very simple thing. Please, I would encourage all of you not to get hung up on the study of coma. It is so rare that I doubt anyone in this room, or maybe at best one person in this room will come across it, and I'll probably be in about 20 years' time.
Exactly, it's there for completeness, and
exactly.
it's much like someone having a fit. Right? They are as likely to have that fit in the hairdressers as they are in a therapy room or a stage hypnotist chair. However, the reason I still say that you can't do this if you're epileptic is because, I know how to deal with it. It's let them have a fit and make sure they don't choke or bang their head. That's the genuine the general medical advice. But I don't want to take that small risk into a show, especially or a performance when other people are involved. So I don't think that I'm going to make the problem, but it's if they happen to have a fit in the middle of my street hypnotism act, I am going to have more explaining to do than the hairdresser. So, for no good reason at all, other than people misunderstand hypnosis.
So just keep these things. Let me put this. Are these rules relatively straightforward? Yes. In terms of, do you want to pass? Are you finished, Cassandra? Have a follow up on that.
I was just going to say it's a very simple, easy solution that people can
Yeah. In terms of like any case of reluctance for people to emerge that you'll come across, treat it along the following lines, which is kind of basically what Cassandra was saying. They're just enjoying it a lot, or they might be a little bit slow to come back, in which case just suggest it more, guide them along a bit more. So you're basically using wake-up suggestions instead of going to sleep suggestions. That's basically, you're reversing your hypnotic process. That's all you're doing. As long as you keep your cool, everything's going to be fine. And even in the really extreme cases, which I doubt really most of you will ever come across, the worst thing that will happen is in a function of time. They will be back. It's just a question of half an hour, 40 minutes. It takes a little bit of time, but that's the most extreme case. Provided you can keep everyone else calm, it'll be just fine. Does that make sense to you guys? Hopefully that gives you a lot of comfort, because this is really the worst thing that can happen, and you should know how to deal with all these things, even though we haven't finished day one yet, which is kind of crazy, isn't it?
And are you doing your reaction drill tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, yeah. Go ahead.
Just quickly, do you fit alcohol in with drugs?
So the question about alcohol and drugs, yes and no. If someone's kind of falling down drunk, then yeah, don't do it. Basically, here's the rule of thumb. If you were sober and you'd feel uncomfortable talking to them because you think this person might, do themselves or you or some harm, or your clothing some harm in some way, then don't work with them. If they're just a little bit happy, fine, right? If they've gone beyond that point where lucidity becomes questionable, then don't work with them, because you're asking for any kind of random wild response to come out. It becomes a lot harder to predict how they will act out on a suggestion.
So suggestibility itself isn't affected by...
Sorry?
No. Suggestibility is not affected by alcohol.
No.
Attention is. If you don't have attention, your job's a lot harder, right? So when a little bit of alcohol is actually good because it loosens some inhibitions. When you start losing the attention span, though, if they cannot focus anymore, well, sometimes that's a safeguard on its own, because they won't go into hypnosis probably because they can't think about it anymore. But on occasion, they'll act out on suggestions more wildly than they should, just because they're just hammed up drunk, and you just want to avoid that. So sloppy drunks, no. Happy drunks, go for it. Okay?
We talked a little bit about drugs, and your doctor or others has given them to you.
Sure.
In particular, psychotic drugs or psychological drugs. Our culture is such that the people on psychological drugs, Prozac and others, has increased so dramatically. I'd be willing to bet that half of the people in here are on Prozac or some other antidepressant or something of that nature. Do you say, that if you're on that sort of thing, that you shouldn't be part of the show?
There's enough people out there that you can have choice. Again, it's the same kind of response as before. I don't think, personally, from my experience, that they're any A, less hypnotizable, or B, more likely to do something crazy. I really don't.
I've had too many of them in my hypnotherapy.
Look, just hedge your bets. It's very simple. If there's any doubt, don't work with that person.
Yeah.
It's really simple. If they seem normal, sane, socialized, lucid people that you invite back to your parents and have a tea with, then chances are you can work with them unless some kind of like medical condition going on.
I was about to hypnotize someone. This guy came up. He was watching some card tricks we were doing downtown the other night, and he seemed friendly enough. I was chatting to him, and then he said, "Take this back to the UK. Tupac Shakur is alive." He's a rapper who was shot and very publicly died. That was good enough reason for me not to work with that person.
Right.
It was. I just the next thing he was talking about Bill Gates, and it was like, okay. My gut feeling, I'm not suggesting this is great from a therapist's point of view. My gut feeling was, you're mad. I don't want to be in your company anymore. I can't deal with this. Right? So I just trust my gut feeling, and politely we all edged away.
It goes right back to what we started the whole day with, which is you're responsible, you have instincts. Don't ignore your instincts just because the seminar said so, right? Go with your instincts. If you don't feel safe with some person, if you feel there's something off with that person, there's a ton of people, especially in places like Vegas, big cities. There are more people than you'll ever be able to meet. So just don't work with that person. Why take a risk, right? Does that kind of make sense to you guys? Sure. It's really simple, common sense sort of stuff. Any other questions, or do you kind of get the idea of health and safety? There's one over here and then one over there. Bring in front first, or right. We'll come to you in a minute. Go ahead.
Do you ever have people that you hypnotized in afterwards, or like, oh, my back hurts, or something like that? So you get, it's like kind of a false claim, but
sure. That's America for you, right?
I avoid those routines. I avoid dropbacks. I avoid arm pulls. I avoid that stuff because then it's very, very difficult for the person to pin that on any act. If you're going to balance someone between two chairs, stand on them, if you're going to drop them onto the pavement, then you don't know if they've got a back condition. The point is they don't know if they've got a back condition, so their complaint may be genuine afterwards. But no, it hasn't happened.
And in terms of, remember this, in terms of doing street hypnosis, assuming you've done everything safely, right? So you're not actually going out to damage people and so on. You got to remember that when people are in a trance, they're all they have this happy glow of trance and they love the world and everything's fantastic. So, when they come back out, they'll be going like, wow, it's an amazing experience. Unless you do something to suggest or imply that this will be a useful or an appropriate course of behavior, I don't think people even think about it because they're too much in the good, positive state, right? And this whole idea of creating a false claim just for the sake of, getting rich off someone else, really, that requires a very different mindset. So you're relatively protected by that, but do bear in mind, you got to still act safely. It does not take responsibility away from you from doing hypnosis safely and taking care of people physically. Does that make sense? You're going to pass it forward, and I think then we're pretty much done, and we can start actually getting some hypnosis done again.
I just want to be clear on something, because I think I've been doing something kind of stupid. But back in San Diego, we have a lot of homeless, grown-up males always bumming money off people. And so lately, I'm not going to do this anymore after hearing this, I've been saying, sure, I'll give you a couple bucks if you let me hypnotize you. And it hasn't gone over very well because their focus has been way off. But now I'm beginning to think if I was successful, I could have all kinds of problems. So I don't think that's something.
There might be, again, I'm not saying that hypnotizing homeless people is a bad thing. It's just, you could ask yourself why. Are they on drugs? Are they on the streets because they have had a psychotic break and the system is not really looking after them? Those are risks that you're taking along the way, right?
That's what their focus is. They can't.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you're being an angel of mercy, you're doing lots of hypnotherapy with people on the streets and so on, assuming you have the skill and the legal backing, especially in a country like America, you need the law on your side there as well. That can be a tremendous thing to do for people. For street hypnosis, if there's any doubt, in my opinion, there is no doubt, right? Work with normal, stable, sane, lucid people, and if you have any doubt about their stability, their sanity, their lucidity, their focus, their mental capacity in any ways, just bow out. It's no big deal. Okay, one last question, and then we'll dive in.
Talking about this brings up the idea of insurance. For stage hypnotists, there's insurance.
Yes.
For hypnotherapy, there's insurance.
Yes.
Will the entertainment insurance cover street hypnosis?
You have to talk to your insurer directly about that. Street hypnosis is such a new concept that I don't think insurance companies have really caught up to it. If you can get them on record saying, sure, that covers it, it's just stage hypnosis on the street, then they'll go, sure, it'll cover it. As long as you have that in written record, then that's a contract between you and your insurer. We can't give you legal advice on that, unfortunately. So yeah, that's something you would have to talk to your insurance company directly about. I remember when I was doing coaching, in the UK it was very new, so I had a training insurance, and I specifically had them write me a letter to confirm that training insurance covers coaching, which was one-to-one training as far as they were concerned, right? So that's something you have to just deal directly with insurers and clarify with them. All right, guys.
Real quick, women in high heels.
Women in high heels, well, that's just a safety issue, right?
That's all part of your setup. If they're in high heels, then...
Yeah, there's a balance issue there, so either sit them down, right? Or make sure that some of their friends are holding them just so they've got that extra balance thing. Again, just go back with the old rule of thumb. If there's any doubt to safety, don't do it, right? Don't do the induction if you think it won't be safe. Don't do the suggestion if you don't think it'll be safe for that person. Don't work with the person if you think that they're unstable in some way. It's a really simple rule of thumb. There are thousands of millions of people in this world that you can happily hypnotize without any consequences, negative consequences, and everyone has a great time. For the purpose of street hypnosis, if there's any doubt, just don't do it, avoid it. It's a great thing to think about. So either you can counter it by sitting them down or taking care of it, say take your shoes off if it's an appropriate environment for that, or you don't do it. Make sense? Everyone happy? All right, guys, let's get some hypnosis done. Everyone stand up, please.
Cheers.
Okay, so before we start going to the whole health and safety thing, you saw Anthony give you a very nice demonstration of the talk through the different suggestion experiments and so on, right? Do you all remember the magnetic hands? It is essentially very easy to do, isn't it? It's just hands out, imagine this, and then suggesting for the hands to come together. It's very straightforward. Does anyone doubt the capacity to be able to do that in this room? Anyone? Excellent. Oh, was that a hand? No, that's someone trying it out. That's good. All right. So what I want you to do is the following. I'd like you to find another person, and I want you to go through a whole routine stack, so another little set piece. The set piece is going to be as follows. Step one is you'll have to open them up. In other words, you'll give them an eyebrow flash, you go over, shake the hand, introduce yourself, that sort of thing. Make sense? Step one is easy to do, right? You've already done it. Step two is present your introduction. I can think of no more elegant and simple introduction than the one Anthony has given to you already, which is the compliment, self-intro, and open question. Does that make sense? Okay, step three, and as part of your intro, you may actually do a call to action as well, which is basically, do you want to try this out? Do you want to have a mind experiment? Do you want to feel really good? Some kind of offer tagged on at the end of it if it's all flowing well, right? Step three, we want to put in, we'll call it health and safety. Literally, we do not expect for you to spend 5 hours explaining the ins and outs of hypnosis and what could go wrong. We just want you to come up with a simple 1 or 2 liner that kind of covers the kind of territory we talked about and will allow you to almost instantly filter out the people you don't want to be working with. Does that make sense? In fact, well, as I think about it, let's just do that straight away. That might be the easiest way. What I want you to do is just go around and meet everyone in this room. Don't worry about introductions. Don't worry about intros or anything like that. The only thing I want you to do is go up, deliver a 1 to 2 line health and safety statement, have them deliver one back at you, and you do another person. I want you to collect as many different versions from different people as you can. Okay? As you go along, you'll hear things other people are saying that you'll like. Feel free to steal it, change your own version, and put that into it. Within 2 or 3 minutes, you should have a very simple, smooth, glib one that you can just throw out there and you're comfortable with. Does that make sense to you guys? So the purpose here is to just go through as many people as possible with literally just a 1 or 2 liner. If the person's still there 5 minutes later, it means you're talking too much. Okay? So the solution to that is stop it. So everyone just walk around the room, just find as many people as possible, give them your 1 or 2 liners on health and safety, and hear them in return. All right, guys, so how was that? Did you find that interesting? Did you hear variations on the whole health and safety statements and you kind of liked some of the things? Hopefully you heard some versions were too long and you went, all right, I get it. I don't need to be belaboring this too much. Is that fair to say? please don't think that just because you have something you're comfortable with right now, that that's the only thing you'll have. All these things will constantly be refined as you progress through your career as a street hypnotist, and that should be the case, right? So always listen out to it, always let your mind kind of tick over about better ways of phrasing, better ways of presenting, and so on. It'll stand you in good stead. It's just good enough for right now. Is that fair? And it doesn't take more than like 10, 20 seconds to come out with your health and safety statement. Is that correct? Okay. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to basically put everything we've done so far together, and then we'll fill in the gaps. You can eyebrow flash and open someone. Is that correct? Yes? You can introduce yourself and give them a little call to action. After the open question, you can offer them something like a hypnotic experience, power of imagination, something like that. Is that correct? Okay. You can present them a very quick and easy health and safety statement. Is that correct?
Yes.
Let me just get the feedback part again. Is that correct? Yes? Question?
Avoided sometimes the use of the word hypnosis, and then you're going to health and safety statement about I'm not allowed. It should be something like I shouldn't hypnotize you if you have X, Y.
So the question here is, he's saying sometimes you avoid the word hypnosis, but then the health and safety says I can't hypnotize you, and then you give them the game away, right?
Can't do the performance.
Exactly. So all the question is you stay congruent with whatever a theme you're playing. If it's like if you're talking about the power of the mind, you say, well, for this experience, I don't want to work with vulnerable people because I need to take extra care and attention to them. So if you're pregnant, if you're on medical drugs of some sort, or have some kind of mental condition, please don't take part in this. It's not that you can't experience the power of the mind. It's just that now's not the time for it. Does that make sense? So just stay congruent with your idea, okay? So we're good up to this point so far. Health and safety, yes? Yes. Next, you do finger vice. Remember this one here? It's easy to do. You did that one? Next, you'll do the magnetic hands. Remember this one here? That was straightforward and easy to do, right? Then you go straight into your induction, a little deepener. Those amongst you who want to go for extra bonus points will put in what I call boilerplates, is those general safety statements. You're here, you're safe, you'll have a fantastic time, you're sitting in your chair or you're standing, sleep and stand. Basically, some key ideas around safety for the performance, right? The classic ones are physically safe, in other words, sleep and stand, or locked on that chair, you can't move from that chair and so on. So it keeps them physically in the environment. The second key one would be emotional safety. To have this experience, you're feeling safe and calm and relaxed and so on. This will be a fantastic experience for you. Those are the key ones. Does that make sense? You do not have to use it at this point. We will weave it in more and more as we go through. For the moment, just throw it in there if you feel like it, if you want to have a little challenge. Otherwise, don't worry about it so much right now. So we're good up to point 5, yes? Yeah. Then we put point 6 and 7, which we can skip for now. And then we'll come on to the ending process. The ending process is very important. Number 1, you want to cancel whatever suggestions you presented to them. What I like to do is a kind of a blanket cancellation that gets rid of all suggestions except the ones I specifically want them to keep, like the hypnotic gift and so on. Why? Because you don't want them to sit there drinking their beer and snorkeling like a pig for the rest of the night. Or maybe you do, but in that case, make sure that there's some kind of consent involved there, right? You don't want the suggestions to continue after you have left. Let me give you an example of what I mean. This did not happen to me. This actually happened to my sister. She was at a party, and an amateur hypnotist was there trying to, just playing around with some ideas. Presented a post-hypnotic suggestion. We'll talk more about what that is tomorrow or the day after. About that they'd have this compulsion, when their eyes open, you have this compulsion to go off and smell the vase of flowers in the corner of the room, right? We count 1, 2, 3, eyes open, nothing. The guy ignored the suggestion. Or so he thought. For the next 3 weeks, this guy had intense dreams of flowers everywhere. He couldn't figure it out. He was going nuts, right? So just because someone doesn't seem to respond to suggestion does not mean that it hasn't activated. It may just have a time delay built in. It may just have a slightly different way of presenting itself than you'd expected. So as a rule, cancel all the suggestions you've presented in your performance, except the ones you specifically want them to carry on with. In other words, in my opinion, it ends up only being the gift, or if you're doing post-hypnotic suggestions for something else, something like that.
All the silly suggestions are gone, everything back to normal, feeling great.
You've heard him say that before, haven't you?
I'll often say, if we've been doing this kind of silly stuff, I'd say all those silly suggestions are gone, everything back to normal. Again, even those terms can be interpreted in different ways, but I just kind of find most people know what I mean. We've done an act, the silly stuff is over. They can keep the good upbeat suggestions that are clearly directed as a post-hypnotic suggestion after the event, such as feeling good and reflecting on the experience in a certain way. And just using that word normal, everything back to normal. Bear in mind you're delivering that as a suggestion. You know, if someone wants to try and sue you because they're not normal, then why didn't they take your suggestion to be normal? You know, again, I'm not suggesting it's the strongest argument or that I'd want to stand behind it in court, but the fact is they were hypnotized, weren't they? I said they were normal. You know, it's just say it. Just get used to cleaning up.
It's just belts and braces, right? Nothing you do is ever going to be 100%, but we can guarantee it as much as possible, right? This stuff will keep you safe. Will keep them safe. It's just a good habit to get into, right? So do you understand that? And then, of course, at the end of it, just bring the normal count 1 to 5, feeling refreshed, alert, and so on. Make sure when they're back that that their eyes are clear, that they're lucid, that they can kind of function in space again, and so on. So there's just as a rule of thumb, especially when you do stuff on the streets, you don't want to leave the moment they come back, eyes open, great, see ya. Hang around for a while. First of all, people will be asking lots of questions anyway, but what you want to be doing is just keeping half an eye. Don't keep looking at the subject like this, because they may take that as another induction and disappear again, right? It's true, it'll happen. It's happened to you, no doubt. Just looking at someone funny, they'll go like, oh, I guess it's an induction, right? But just be normal, chat to the people and so on, and keep half an eye on the person that you've just hypnotized, or the people you've just hypnotized, to make sure that they are back to normal, that their eyes are clear, they're not having trouble focusing, that the speech is clear, that their movements through space are clear, they're not having problems, you know, orienting the limbs and so on. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? Once you spend it doesn't take long, about 5 minutes is usually enough to get a good sense that these guys it's all good.
Ensure that you become more upbeat in your wake-up as well. Quite often when people have been relaxing and counting down and making you feel good and whispering away and all this kind of stuff, it's fine. If you carry on in the same manner, same tempo and attitude when you do the wake-up, then they're quite often roused and they're a little bit drowsy and they're still very relaxed. And again, I've done a wake-up here a few times now. You see, it's right, in a moment, I'm going to count to 5. And on the count of 5, this is how it's going to be. 1, feeling wonderful. 2, sitting up in the chair. 3, taking a deep breath. There's no choice other than to be energized and wide awake and alert, because that's where it's all being pushed. And again, afterwards, the question is, you feeling good? I appreciate it's a leading question, but
lead away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Are you okay? No, it's not great. You feeling good? How relaxing was that? How refreshing is that?
Do you guys get a sense of these 9 steps? Don't worry about 6 and 7 just yet. We'll fill that in a minute. This is very simple stuff, right? It's just a few extra steps. It's just really, you've done more or less everything on this list. It's just a question of putting together in a sequence and getting used to it. Isn't that right? So everyone stand up, please. Put your books down. Find a person and run them through the 9 steps, making sure to skip steps 6 and 7.
We don't know what they are, though.
Yeah. I know.
Give suggestions, aren't they?
That'll make it easier to skip.
Anything else of hypnosis character. I want to know, if you're over 18, you haven't got any mental, medical, or physical conditions I need to know about. If so, tell me now. So, taking that big, deep breath again, looking into this eye. That's right. You're about to have an extremely pleasant journey in the trance. Just give me your hand. Ulичный, that's right. Soon I will drop your hand. When I do, you will close your eyes and go into deep state of trance. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, sleep. Deeper, deeper, deeper. The deeper you go, the more relaxed you feel. The more relaxed you feel, the deeper you go. That's right. Even deeper. That's right. Feeling that relaxation spreading throughout your body. Feeling just amazing and realizing you will become the hypnotist you like. In fact, you already are. This weekend will be a roller coaster. Have a good time. You will have laughs and giggles. You will learn a new skill set. And you will have an amazing time meeting the most wonderful people you can meet. Is that an agreement? That's right. Taking that feeling back to this room, starting to hear the voices around you again, coming wide awake. I will count from 3 to 1 and you will be back. 3, 2, 1, feeling fantastic. How do you feel? Awesome.
I'm feeling every word I give you, every suggestion I give you is your reality completely and absolutely. As arm gets higher and higher, lighter and lighter, you rock even more now, that's right. And the more you rock, the deeper you go. And the deeper you go, the better you feel, that's right. The arm gets higher and higher, lighter and lighter. Instantly, every word I say, instantly it will lead to be your reality. That's right, arm all the way up to the sky now, pulled up on that wire, pushed up on that cushion of air. That's right, the waves have stopped. That's right, the sea's gone calm, it's all sunny all of a sudden. You're feeling warm, really warm because of how sunny it is. That's right, that's right. Oh no, the storm's come back now, waving in the sea again, in the ocean. You will not fall over, you're completely safe, completely fine. But it is strong, it's sending you deeper now, deeper sleep, and stop again. That's right, it's sunny once again, and a lovely calm day. This arm's going higher into the sky now, all the way up, as you go deeper, deeper sleep. That's right. In a moment, I'm going to have you open your eyes. When you open your eyes, you'll find that arm is just stuck out there, like a statue's arm. It's no longer connected to your conscious mind, and you don't know why. It's connected to your unconscious mind. This arm belongs to me, courtesy of your unconscious mind. It's no longer connected to your conscious mind. When I tap you on the shoulder and you look at that arm, you will not be able to move it. It's weird, right? Look at that arm and realise how it's just stuck out there. And you can't, it's not connected to your brain anymore. It's weird, isn't it? It's just not there. Paralysed for a short while, courtesy of your unconscious mind. Yeah, it's just stuck there. So it's the kind of thing that happens to your feet. Your feet are locked down, bolted, rooted into the ground, so much so that you're stuck down there. Like a statue stuck into the ground, rooted, held down, like an Imagio. That's right, stuck down. Here's the really interesting thing. In a moment, the arm will be able to move, but only when I touch it. The reason the arm's able to move when I touch it is because you'll completely forget your name. No idea what your name is, you're completely gone. You can't move the arm yet. When I touch it, you will not be able to recall your name. You will not be able to work it out. Like when you try and remember the name of a celebrity and the more you try and get it, the further away it becomes. You just can't work out that name. It's gone. The arm goes loose and limp. You can't remember your name anymore. What's it like your name? Try and say it, you just can't say it. My name's Vince, you have no idea what your name is. Try and say your name, it's weird, right? No idea. In fact, you can't remember anything. You feel safe, you can't remember what shoe size you are. You're going to guess a random number. Hi, what shoe size are you? Any ideas? Some crazy wacky number.
6.
6? Take another guess, another crazy guess.
7.
No idea, right? In fact, numbers mean nothing to you.
All right, guys, so who enjoyed themselves doing that? Who here is starting to feel like a genuine street hypnotist? Doesn't this feel like a whole thing that you're doing here? Would you like us to add just a few little things inside here that will give you a complete performance, A to Z, start to finish, something you can take out on the streets tonight, which will be easy. It'll be a no-brainer. It'll be impressive, and something you can do anytime you want. Would you like that? Well, really, there's no difference between what we're about to do and what you've already done. It's just a question of tweaking it in sort of a particular variety. Have all of you, how did the magnetic hands go? Was it straightforward enough? Right? Why do you think the magnetic hands was so easy to do? Any ideas? Because you already primed it. You already had the finger vise, which is loaded physically to work. You had a success mechanism, and success breeds success. So this is easy to pass the way it's set up. This is a little less easy. It relies more on suggestion, but because the mind is already in that success mindset, it'll just accept the suggestions. Does that make sense? Now, if those hands came together, who here pushed their hands together on their own just because they felt like it? No hands? Who here noticed that as the suggestions were being presented, those hands moved as though they were moving by themselves? Anyone? Well, what is that if not a hand levitation sideways? Irrelevant.
It's irrelevant, but I normally do fingers with the eyes open. When they touch, I suggest they close. Magnetic hands, that's my excuse for getting them their eyes closed. When I do the rehearsal, I say, I'll show you what we're going to do because you're going to do this with your eyes closed, as if it's a bit more challenging. And that's just so I can observe them, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, just personal style for that one,
Yeah.
okay? So, how can we get hand levitation? Right? Really, there's no magic to it. The simple answer is you suggest it, straight out, right? This is a suggestion for hand levitation, just sideways, isn't it? Hands coming together. So if you can get this, then you can get this. The only real difference between this and this is you already have it loaded in your favor here a little bit because the hand's already out there. You're not fighting gravity at this point, right? At this point, there might be a little bit of fighting gravity. So there's a couple of things that you can do if you'd like to cheat. Anyone want to cheat with hand levitation? Get a little bit easier? If you remind me, then tomorrow, before we finish up the formal part of the training and the bonuses of the training starts, I will show you the virtually foolproof, instant arm levitation induction that you can do on almost anyone and it'll work every time.
That's very good.
It's kind of fun, isn't it?
It's more than fun because you can hypnotize with it as well.
So that's for the future a little bit. What I want you guys to do right now is everyone put your pens and paper down, would you? And let's play a little game here. I'd like you to turn to the person next to you, just make eye contact. Get close enough to touch. Not in any way that's Vegas-like. Now, I'd like one of you guys to just be the hypnotist right now. Choose in your pairings one hypnotist. Yes? Everyone have that? Jonas, you may want to focus in on this. So one person in each group is a hypnotist, is that correct? Hypnotist, I want you to reach over to one of the other person's wrists and just pick it up a little bit. Just very lightly. Now, as I continue to talk, I want you to just move it gently up, down, left, right, just in random directions. Up, down, left, right. Slow, tiny movements. Slow, tiny movements. So slow that down a little bit here. Slow that down, Kathy. Real slow, small movements. And here's the thing. Round about now, you should notice that if you release the pressure in your fingers just a little bit, that hand kind of stays there by itself anyways. Right? So just notice if you can just start changing grip a little bit until the hand kind of just stays there anyway. And then just see if you can take your hand off entirely. What you have right now is something that took me 3 years of fear to get to. It's called hand catalepsy. If you can get this, the levitation is just a whisper of a suggestion away. And it's really that easy. Now, the reason we started with this for the hand levitation is purely and simply because that's now defied gravity. Gravity is no longer working against you. You don't need it. Well, you may as well have it. Does that kind of make sense to you guys? So all we're going to do for the hand levitation is, if you want to touch someone, especially if they're in trance, just warn them, I'm about to touch your right wrist, or I'm about to touch you on the wrist, right here, right? Now, one of the things you can do, you can either just pick it up and carry on talking to them, because in a moment, this hand here is going to just find a really interesting experience. There, catalepsy. Simple, quick, easy, and I appreciate it so much that you are working with me, unconscious mind. Because in a moment, you find this hand just wanting to lift up all the way, just comfortable lifting sensation. There you go, it just begins. A nice, natural lifting. There you go, that's it. And you can just enjoy this experience, resting up here in front of everyone, being recharged and re-energized, knowing that when you come back out, you'll be able to do an even better job being a presenter for these guys. In the meantime, just enjoy the sensation of lifting. You can you not? I mean, is there anything magical in the suggestions I've given there? Not really. You're just saying the hand will feel light, taking lift. You can put imagery, hand balloon lifting, all that kind of stuff. It does not matter, as long as you provide the idea of lifting to it. And I like the idea of touching purely and simply because it's quicker, right? And because they don't quite know what's happening. If you borrow their hand and you just lift it up and start talking to them about other things, eventually they forget about their hand, it becomes cataleptic by default. Does that make sense? And whenever you're ready, feel free to bring yourself back, totally alert, totally refreshed, and kind of looking forward to doing some hypnosis today. Rock and roll. This is where we get a little treat to ourselves as the trainers. I'd like to give you an example of what I mean on how you can do this totally in the waking state, although you won't be doing it in the waking state. Can I just have a quick volunteer? Anyone? I haven't used you yet. Come on up. Give a nice round of applause. So if you just stand over here a second. So first of all, thanks a lot for coming. Now, what's your name again?
Fiona.
Fiona. Okay. So Fiona is going to volunteer for something, right? She doesn't know what it is yet, but she's already done it. You see how for a moment the hand just rested there before she starts being aware of it again and start moving it. It's that easy. Now in trance, that effect gets multiplied multiple fold. And it didn't even take, how long did it take? A few seconds? Now, if I carry on doing this, notice this, it's called ambiguous touch. I'm just basically talking about something random. It keeps her intellect engaged. Meanwhile, her unconscious mind is taking care of the hand. Now, believe it or not, this feels to her right now as though I'm holding a hand up. Doesn't it? Yeah. But it's physically impossible, isn't it? Where's my hand touching? Watch. Right? Gravity does not work this way. But it still feels as though I'm holding it up, doesn't it? Have I induced a trance yet? No. That's where it gets ambiguous, isn't it? Now, if it's this easy, just in a normal conversation, then when you have trance and all the other things going for you, wouldn't that be a no-brainer? Would that be fair to say? Especially given that you've already done it. Free movement, return to your hand. Thank you so much. Give her a round of applause. So here is what I'm going to ask you guys to do. Find a different partner, or the partner you just worked with is fine, just a different partner from the previous exercise, right? I want you to go through this whole thing here again, only this time. When you get to step 6 and 7, at step 6, I want you to put in a hand levitation, right? And the simplest way is get catalepsy and then suggest for it to continue lifting. That's it. Is that easy to do? It really is a no-brainer at this stage. The next thing to do is once the hand starts lifting, you may as well make it purposeful. Remember the idea of linking we talked about earlier on? Associating, attaching things? This is exactly the same as the hypnotic gift, only this time we're going to make it a little more dramatic. We're going to take the idea of laughter. Why? Because it's dramatic and it kind of encourages the audience to do things as well, and it becomes a really nice launch pad for other things that you're doing. So get them to start laughing. Now notice, the rules that Anthony was talking about earlier on still apply. Tell them directly what's going to happen. You're going to find it funny. It's pretty direct, isn't it? Then get indirect. Repeat the same suggestion more indirectly. You know, like you just had an amazing experience that just you find hysterical, right? You're going to find it funny, like you've had an experience that is just hysterical. That's a more indirect way of repeating the same idea. Then maybe give some imagery. You know, maybe something silly you've seen or something silly you remember, or just a funny joke you've heard. So you're stimulating the imagination with funny ideas, shall we say. Does that make sense? You don't have to sit there and tell jokes, but if you have a little one-liner you're going to throw it out there, this might be a good time to do it just to prime the pump a little bit, right? And always start with a small response is enough. A little twitch of the mouth is enough of a response to build to a large response, and that's all, right? In the same way as just a little bit of tightness in the arm can be built up until you have full catalepsy, which can be built up into a full levitation. A small response always leads to a large response if you keep suggesting, keep plugging away. Does that make sense? So we're purposely not going to give you too many phrasings or language for the whole thing, because it's about time that you guys started working out your own suggestions. It's the ideas that you're presenting that's important. So you start off, find someone, open them, little eyebrow flash, little smile, introduce yourself, offer them some kind of a mind hypnotic type experience, put your health and safety things in first, finger vice, magnetic hands, do your induction, do your deepener. If you want to boost some boilerplates here, that's fine. Then quickly, just take a few seconds, get the little hand, like hand cataleptic, then get it to lift up. As it's lifting up, link this lifting process to something funny, something that makes them laugh. So when you touch the face, they're laughing, smiling away, and so on. Build up on it, and just take it as far as you can go. Really have a good time with it, right? Once you're at that laughing stage, remember, cancel the suggestions again. There's one last thing we'll do actually out on the streets, which we won't do here now for time reasons. Just cancel the suggestions, finish your show, you're done. You've done a solid piece of impressive street hypnosis that people will call home tonight about and go, I saw this amazing thing, you won't believe it. Guaranteed. Does that make sense? Any questions? That's what I like to see. Everyone stand up, please find a partner, off you go.
They're going to start to move together. And when they begin to move together, you start to feel that magnet pulling in closer and closer. And as they move closer and closer, that's right, you're going to start to feel a feeling of gratitude for your own self, for all the skills you've built, you're going to start to notice that your own hypnosis skills are getting even more profound, even more and more and more profound. That you can actually do them with absolutely anybody. Even people that would normally be considered resistant become nothing in front of you. That's right, because they come closer and closer and closer together, wanting to touch, feeling to touch. Before they touch, you can feel the shooting energy, that electricity shooting in between your hands so much that when they do touch, it's going to shoot a feeling all the way through your body, all the way to the top of your head, all the way down to the tips of your toes, all the way down to your feet. Feel that now, can't you? Good. Allowing your hands to completely come together, And when you do, a thought's going to enter your mind, a thought you've never had before, a thought that's going to feel so good that it's actually going to bring a smile to your face. And you can't allow your hands to move closer and closer together, actually coming palm to palm. Good. That's awesome. That's good. That's right. You can feel it twitching, you can feel it moving. When you have that thought may be enough for your hands just to allow themselves to stay there. And the thought can form itself in the front of your mind. You can allow it to move all the way to the back to the front, all the way down, right into your heart where it actually finds itself resting. When you're ready to do that, close your eyes and just get completely calm and relaxed. On the count of 3, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. When I get and reach 3, you're going to feel your arms relax all the way down to your sides, allowing that thought that you had before, that really nice thought, that good thought, to bury itself all the way inside of your mind. Bury it down so deep that even 10 years from now, when it decides to resurface like a seedling growing into a flower, into a plant, you'll have a good feeling that'll actually make you smile all the way. In 1, 2, and 3. Relaxing all the way down. Relaxing every muscle in your entire body is completely relaxed. In a moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 5. When I count from 1 to 5, I'm going to come back into the room feeling better than you felt in weeks, months, years. It's probably the best feeling you have ever felt in your entire life, because you know that if a seed planted in the ground is cared for and loved and taken care of, and that seed can grow into a beautiful flower, just like a thought can turn into a whole bunch of feelings, good feelings, positive feelings, loving feelings, full feelings that start from underneath and grow up all the way up. Counting up 1, coming back into the room feeling really, really good, hearing the sounds around you. Number 2, knowing the seed is growing and will continue to grow every day until the day that it sprouts. 3, coming all the way back and taking a deep breath, feeling phenomenal. Number 4, knowing you are the best hypnotist in the room. 5, wide awake, feeling phenomenal.
Impressive, well done. That was good.
So, how are you guys doing? Did you enjoy that? Yeah. Weren't your hypnotists pretty awesome? Yeah. Do they deserve a round of applause? Yeah. I think so. So, we've done pretty much the essence of what I'm going to ask you guys to do tonight. The only thing I'll ask you to add, if you feel like it, really, at that point, is if you want to add a gift just before you wake them up. You've done that already, that's an easy thing to do, right? So you may as well throw it in there. So it's a nice, simple 10-stage process from opening, introduction, health and safety, a couple of tests, an induction and deepener, a couple of phenomena, the arm levitation and laughter, cancelling the general suggestions so they're back to normal, then doing a gift overall that they can take away with them as a happy memory of some sort, and then bring back out, right? It's a very straightforward piece. It'll take you maybe about, well, it depends how much you elaborate on it, but it can take you anywhere between 6 and 20 minutes to do, right? You can really milk it if you wanted to. You can pare it down to its minimum if you wanted to. But you have a nice range to play with that. Does that make sense to you guys? Now, how do you feel about this, by the way? Pretty good? Yeah? Now, let me put it this way. I know some of you are a little older hands. You've done a little hypnosis before. But more for the beginners as well. Just realize this. You can do all this after 1 day. You've been doing this for how many hours? Not that many, right? 1 day, and you're doing stuff that most hypnotherapists are afraid to even try to do, right? Are there any hypnotherapists in the room, people who were hypnotherapists before this? Would it be fair to say that most hypnotherapists are afraid to even try these things in case they might fail or something, and you've been doing them without thinking about it, all right? So at some level, you have a very advanced skill set that is not common in the industry. And I want you to appreciate that when you go out there and start doing this stuff tonight, right? In fact, you may as well reach over and pat yourself on the little back and go, well done me, right? So who feels good about this whole thing? Yeah? So here's what we're going to do in a moment. In a moment, we'll split you up into groups again, and we'll go out. We'll go out on the strip tonight, so you get to experience the strip at night. It's a little bit different to the strip at daytime. You can use similar locations. There's lots of places. I'm going to encourage you to stop. I'll speak about some in a moment. And essentially, you can do anything you want. You can do the exact same drill you did this morning when you went out at lunchtime, where you hypnotize a couple of people in your own group. You can go up to strangers and try out the whole system, right? If you don't feel quite ready for that yet, then you can just do your own group and invite people in, to a little hybrid in between the two. Honestly, I don't care. I will encourage you, though, I will ask you to do at least one complete set piece from start to finish, at least with your peers from the seminar, but out on the streets where other people can see you, right? If that in itself is enough, shall we say, stretching yourself and challenge, that's all you can handle, that's fine. This is not a race. You don't have to do all of this at once, right? If you can do that, then I know you have the skill that over time, you'll be able to do it anywhere as well. Does that make sense to you guys? That's just a question of getting accustomed to it and so on. If you do want to challenge yourself, then just invite someone into the group and work with them. I know about half of you have already done so over lunch break. If you want to challenge yourself even further, then start playing with the approach. And remember, the key to the approach is a friendly, relaxed attitude. And it's not one thing from them. You should have about as non-committal an attitude as you do when you ask someone the time. That's it. That's really easy to do, isn't it? Do you guys have any questions about anything you've done so far? So let's have a little chat about places to go. This is for you guys at the back as well, for the assistants. I understand most of you were out just outside the hotel. There's a nice little area there with lots of people moving around. Is that correct? Yeah? So feel free to try that again. If that's still happening and buzzing, fantastic, right? When you head out the hotel and turn left down the strip, really, what I would suggest to you is stay with your group leader, so your groups stay together, but the other groups can carry on going past. Whenever you see an area which has high traffic, in other words, a lot of people walking around, and it's not too narrow, then you might as well stop and start playing there, right? Because you just want attention. That's really all you're looking for. The most likely spots you'll find, as you walk down this way, you'll get to a little casino hotel called the Imperial, and right in front of it is a whole bunch of little shops and little rock bars, and they have like live music and so on. At this time of night, that's going to be a really cool place to be. Lots of people, there's a lot of little bars there, there's lots of music. It's a real mini gathering type place. You will have to work with music though, with loud music, right? So for those of you who are interested in working in general bars and club atmospheres, that's a great starting point because it's not too loud, but you still have to contend with the music. So those of you who like that, let's actually do it this way. Which of you assistants likes the idea of working in a louder venue? Right? Ahmed, do you know to play this venue? So Ahmed, if you just stand over by the water cooler. Anyone who likes the idea of working in a louder venue because you want to end up doing this sort of stuff in bars and clubs, places with louder music, please go and stand with Ahmed over there, who is just standing by the exit. There you go. You already have a volunteer, right? Just go up there and then grab him, because that's really, in my opinion, the best place for that. It's not too noisy, but it's going to have a nice umph to it. Then, if you carry on, let's have a think. If you look as you come out past before the whole area, if you look over to Treasure Island, there's like these big pirate ships outside of it. There tends to be a bunch of people collecting around there. It's time-based, so have a quick scan over there. If they're not there yet, then just carry on. Outside Caesar's Palace is always a good place. There's a big set of shops there. There's lots of glamour, lots of lights going on. That's a good place, so you keep an eye out for there. Who was outside Bally's earlier on? So I recommend you go somewhere else just to have a different experience, but you're welcome to go back to the same place, right? But outside of the Bally's Hotel, it's a great area. Right now there'll be a lot of traffic. The Adult Expo has just started, so there'll be a lot of people going to that or coming from it. If you want to do street hypnosis in the Adult Expo, you have to buy a ticket. It's $40, but feel free. Just just go and I guess enjoy the evening there at that point as well. if you're going to leave the groups, go ahead. Yeah, okay, in terms of security, let's just handle this just straight away. As a rule, it's open territory and so on. You can kind of go wherever you want, but security guards seem to extend their area of authority, so whatever. In my opinion, it's very simple. Go to these places, have fun. If the security starts getting hassled, look, we're just having fun. If they're being a little bit, if they're pestering you, just move on somewhere else. It's no big deal, right? Vegas is a big, long place, so just enjoy yourself. Exactly. Exactly. The key thing here is just don't become a pest. Don't block up entrances. Don't do anything like that. Other than that, just have your fun, and it should be straightforward.
Keep in mind, I've got another day of training tomorrow.
Exactly.
I've got another outing to somewhere completely different.
Yes, tomorrow night we'll have a really special place planned for you guys.
If you have a couple of experiences tonight with different people, that would be good. Just try and push things a little bit further than you did at lunch.
So, other nice places. Planet Hollywood has a great area outside with lots of shops and so on. At this time, it's really busy. Bellagio, right outside by the fountain, there'll be no security guards there because it's actually on the main street. And that's a phenomenal place. Everyone stops to look at the fountain, especially the show. I think it's every half hour or so. You'll have a big crowd at that point. So that's a great place. You'll probably have at least 2 groups there. If you want to enter a hotel, feel free to do so. Just remember the rules. Avoid the casino areas. Stay to the food courts or the shopping areas. And be polite, be respectful, and if the security guards get a little bit uppity about it, it's no big deal. Just move along, and we'll find somewhere else, okay?